Morning, Mark.
Good morning.
Morning, everybody over on Rumble, YouTube, and especially X at LawPod Daily. I think Mark tweet just went out. Let me see if I can see it. Cool. Well, Mark, happy Friday the 13th. Happy Free-aky Speech Friday.
Happy Day of Jihad, as the scumbags have declared it.
I am honored to have, for everybody listening, we have hosted this gentleman on our long form podcast several times. Mark, I can't remember the last time that we had you on. It's been too long, I'll admit. But in the time since then, you and I have we've gone on a couple of journeys together. And for everyone watching and listening, this is someone who has had a tremendous impact on my career as a young attorney. He's going to be humble because that's how he was raised. He was raised by a great family, and he has incredible values and is one of the more balanced people in the world. But I want to publicly give him the flowers because as you all know, I'm a big fan of doing that while people can still smell them. So Mark, I'm honored to have you here. I think for everybody who's joining us, many of them are going to know who you are. But for those who do not, I consider you to be a free speech juggernaut, right? First Amendment juggernaut in the practice of law. I have the stripes to say that. You and I have been on the battlefield together, and I have served at your command. So welcome, Marc Randazza, and I'd love for the chat to give you the same sort of warm welcome.
Yeah, man, one of the funnest cases I've ever done, we worked on together.
We did.
The flying dog case. And I'm sorry about the sun angle here. It should
it's shining on you.
Yeah, this is how my mother sees me all the time. So I think that's so one of the advantages of being an Italian mama's boy. But yeah, when we worked on that flying dog case, defending the art of Ralph Steadman on behalf of a company that pretty much just gave us marching orders of uphold and defend the First Amendment. I don't give a shit what else, what it takes. But I think the real fun part was my 13-year-old daughter had decided she wanted to be a lawyer. So I brought her to that hearing, and she's sitting there in the front row laughing the whole time because the case was really about a 4x6 pixel depiction of a penis on a beer label. And at the end, she's like, "Daddy, I'm really sorry. I was laughing the whole time, but I'm looking at all these grown men and I know how much money's being spent." And she's like, "And I see hundreds of thousands of dollars and all these grown men in this big serious courtroom, and you're all arguing about a little cartoon penis." And I'm like, "Yeah, welcome to Randazza."
So funny. Swipe to see the uncensored label. And this is what was banned in North Carolina. So what Mark is referring to is Flying Dog Brewery out of Maryland had a product they were trying to bring into the state of North Carolina called Freezing Season, their winter ale. And the art that was submitted to the North Carolina Alcoholic Beverage Control Commission was as seen on the screen there. And it was disapproved pursuant to some sort of arbitrary and individual determination that, this was somehow in bad taste. And so Mark somehow found me. I think you just did a Google search, maybe. I don't know. I think you Google searched and came up with Carolina Craft Legal out of thin air, which, I think the sort of the magic of you being here and us talking about this is that you also know Norm Pattis independent of that, right? You've worked with Norm Pattis independent of that on various matters of varying persuasions. And so you and I connected completely independent of my relationship with Norm and your relationship with Norm, which makes this to me a really magical relationship that we enjoy, Mark. It is our own.
The reason I brought you on that case, I want people to know that this is how you do it. I'm I'm ready to go in. I already had local counsel in North Carolina. Great guy, Greg Doucette. You know, we were all loaded up, and I'm doing some kind of last minute research. And then I find, damn, man, here's a guy that all he does is beer law in North Carolina. Like, maybe not all you do, but that was like the pinnacle of what you do. And I'm saying there is no way that I'm going to do this case and leave this guy on the sidelines.
And so I did. I tagged along. I just,
because I think, you know, when I was, you know, you're not that young of a lawyer, but you're still a young lawyer to me. You know, when I was in my early years, I mean, I remember working on legal issues, and then I'd see the big case that was going to determine one of these issues.
Sure.
Like, man, I should be in that case, you know, even just in the cheap seats. And I'm never going to let somebody who a case is just completely spiritually designed for not be on that team. You know, it's just,
well, it was that
how a profession should operate.
It was perfect. It was perfect. And you know, where my inexperience lied, that was where you had full command, and where my subject matter command was strong. That is, I still believe, was instrumental in making the arguments that we made to the federal court. And for those listening, this is the gentleman to which I've made reference when I say that that North Carolina law has been changed as far as alcoholic beverage regulation goes by and through pursuing claims under the First Amendment. And this is, you know, the flying dog case against the North Carolina ABC Commission. So we were extraordinarily successful. That was a very quick case as far as I'm concerned.
And it helped that, you know, it helped that the guys working for the Attorney General's office weren't douchebags. You know, everybody behaved like gentlemen. I mean, man, it was so like stereotype theater when I walked into that courtroom, because
my cousin Vinny S. Right.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, you know, first off, I find out as I'm going into the courtroom that the board members that we were suing had grown up with my aunts. So my aunt was like, "Oh my God, you're suing him? We went to high school together." And I'm like, "Oh man." But also, you know, the way the guy who argued for the state started, I mean, he starts off with like this 10-minute soliloquy about how great I am. It was like such a, you know, just stereotypical Southern genteel thing. And here I am. I'm like, I got my Yankee ready to slap somebody upside the head attitude. Completely took that out of my hands. And I'd be like, well, you know, Your Honor, he's pretty awesome too. But I was just, it was such a pleasure dealing with them. And then look, once they knew it was over, it got resolved. There was no like fighting for pride. I mean, I got other cases, man, where it is just so obvious. And what you've got is you've just got such assholes on the other side of it, you know? I guess it depends on if you're.
I wish I could say that we really fixed the ABC Commission with that case, but that is so far from the truth. You know, we may find ourselves in league with one another again sometime soon. But let's move into. Well, look, there are worse things than having fun doing your job, you know?
Right.
Let's move into something that is very much within your wheelhouse. I told you a little bit before the stream that Norm and I have been really getting at this notion of the First Amendment in a digital era. And and what I am really focused on as a 33-year-old sort of young millennial, Mark, I've said it to our viewers, but for you, just so that you've got custody over my full perspective, I came of age as I was born in 1990. So you can imagine that my introduction to the internet was unique to probably your introduction to the internet, what the internet really was, or perhaps what you perceived it could be when you first encountered it. And my first encounters were really like dial-up AOL, right? That was the internet as far as I was concerned. We had to unplug our phone, plug in the Ethernet cable into the modem because you couldn't have both connected at the same time, right? My mother used to get really irritated if I needed to get on the internet because she couldn't receive any phone calls, right?
The world was a better place then.
It was healthier, and there was a moderation. There was almost a forced moderation to internet use at that time, but very quickly that changed, right? There was very quickly broadband came into the picture. That sort of dial-up thing faded away. And social media was something that was almost the dominant use of the internet for my cohort. And I'm talking about things like a Zanga profile. I'm talking about the early days of like the blogging era, but then Zanga gave way to something like MySpace, and then you had your MySpace top 8, right? Intensely social, very visual, sort of braggadocious. And curated to one's individual style. And then from there, MySpace gave way to Facebook. And for a long time, Facebook was a sort of a who's who. It was very guarded, very limited in terms of, visibility by your elders. And then when Facebook got wise to monetization and its pathway to scale its business by including every monetizable asset on planet Earth, aka humans, it opened the floodgates to everyone. And at that point, social media changed, because I remember that was the watershed moment when people were having to like go back through their entire a Facebook profile or anything that they had done in the past, because it was a very sort of community driven thing, very guarded, not looked at by the outside world. And all of a sudden, all the pictures of those parties or all the, posts and the slurs and whatever you were using amongst friends, that became something that was just fully visible to the broader public.
Oh yeah.
And as we've gone barreling into this, the advertising model has obviously really dominated the way that companies force conversations on the internet, what content everybody is able to see. So there's this illusion from an individual perspective that you sort of curate your own experience online. But what we have become wise to through the COVID era, Mark, in my opinion, is that is very far from the truth, that a lot of what you see online, even on your own social channels, is highly arbitraged by the algorithm. And so there is a fundamental question from my perspective as to whether the medium is more than just speech. And the best way to look at this, and I'm getting at, I don't want to bury the lead, is social media addictive in the sense that we should be looking at regulation of these tech companies, these social media companies, from a vantage other than censorship or First Amendment scrutiny. But I don't want to skip over that as if it's not important, because we do have a state like Montana that has ratified a law, and it is set to become effective in January. They finished oral arguments yesterday that seeks to ban the use of TikTok in the state of Montana. What does that mean to you as a First Amendment lawyer, Mark?
Well, let me start with what it means to me as a human. As a human, I think it's a great idea. I think there are I hear lots of really great ideas that are unconstitutional. I mean, people have asked me like, hey man, why don't you run for office? It's like, no, man, if I did, the streets would run red with blood. There'd be we'd reopen all the eugenics camps, that they used to have. There'd be all kinds of crazy shit. I'd ban all kinds of stuff. It would be worse than North Korea. And I can tell you that because I have a model with how I run my own home. And my own kids are like, Dad, we don't have any freedom here. I can't do this on my phone. Every single thing they do on their phone, I have to get an approval, and I have to put my code in to let them have it. And it is locked down. You have more freedom as a North Korean dissident than you do as my child.
As it should be, in my opinion. And you know what I mean? I get it. We were all on the other side of that, or at least I think I was much more on the other side of that than perhaps you ever were. But your children are far more on the other side of that than I ever was. And that's just a function of how pervasive and ubiquitous that internet function is in our day-to-day lives now, right?
Well, and it's also, I have this kind of weird thing that I do called parenting, which, we seem to have a huge segment, probably a majority of our society now, that just doesn't want to do that either, because, dads say, well, I blew my load. That's my part of being a dad. Or just parents are too busy or too lazy or too stupid. And anybody can reproduce, just like anybody can vote. Like the two things that you ought to have qualifications to do, you don't need qualifications to do. So in Randazza, yes, we would pass this law. We would not only pass this law, we would find some way to actually kill the people who run TikTok from top to bottom and then put their bodies out in the street to
What
rot.
was didn't you have sort of an idea about sort of how you would enforce this? I think you said something about anybody under 22. I can't remember.
Yeah. See, first of all, I think 18 is a stupid age as an arbitrary age for anything. I don't think you should be able to vote till you're 30. And I think if you go on social media, I think every CEO at every social media company should have to wear a fleshlight that has a cactus in it. And that cactus jams into their junk every time a minor goes onto their platform. If that's worth it to you, then go ahead. But, you know, we don't live in Randazza. And by God, if you ever have an opportunity to live there, don't do it. It's terrible. It is a fascist, complete lockdown place.
But there is a recognition there of some sort of certain evil, right? There is or maybe I don't want to, maybe not big E evil, but maybe, right? I don't want to foreclose that. I think there's a show. I think I can't remember the platform. It's called American Gods. Are you familiar with that? I commend that to anyone watching. At least that first season was mind blowing and transformative in the way that we see the modern, I guess, polytheistic motifs play out in our society. You know, we're used to reading things that are long since dead and dusty, and they have this static nature to them. But the introduction of the internet is almost like a new form of magic unleashed on society, right? And I think that's sort of, I have this intuition about it.
Yeah, when you think about it, like if you think about how people thought back in times of far greater, some people would say superstition, other people would say religious devotion, whatever you want to call it. You know, you actually thought, I got to watch out. God's watching what I'm doing.
That's right.
At all times, right? Well, the internet is God now. It watches every damn thing you do. And yes, sometimes you see like ads pop up on your social media and you think, what the hell did I look at for this to be advertising this to me? I mean, like I do a lot of my clients are in the porn industry. So, and I don't get high on their supply. So, you know, I'm not really much of a consumer of pornography, but I have to sit on there and I'm looking at it. I'm like screening videos being like, did they leave a pack of cigarettes on the counter? And I'm going to get a demand letter. Like, porn was ruined for me when it started becoming work. When I got it
was a compliance gig, you know.
You left a pack of Marlboros on the end table, and now I'm going to get a demand letter from Marlboro.
You know, cease and desist from Marlboro.
You know, I did one. I did a case one time for Bang Brothers where Terrell Owens had just signed like a new contract. And he was in all kinds of trouble before that. So he signed a morals clause saying he'd be a good boy. He'd stay away from everything that was going to, make the team look bad.
Keep doing the chunky soup, the Campbell's chunky soup commercials, right? Wholesome stuff.
Tio was doing his best to be a good boy. And he's driving down South Beach and he gets out of a car and he's just crossing the street with a huge smile on his face. And he doesn't realize that on the very other side of the Jeep that he's behind, there's like, a girl masturbating there, right on the street. And it turns out that the guys editing the video didn't know who he was. It was, they were, they would have recognized the South American soccer player. They didn't recognize him. So this poor guy winds up like on the cover, right? So right there. So T.O. is like, sending us a demand letter. And I'm like, oh man, I'm wicked sorry. Like we didn't know, we got him into all kinds of trouble and he wasn't even doing anything. Now,
okay. So that's an unreal story just because, an unintentional cameo in South Beach in a
porn,
yeah, that's wild. And T.O., what a legend. But yeah, he had a few moments. Amazing that his PR team was able to kind of bury that one. I don't know that really reached the masses, right?
Yeah, well, we cared. That the nice thing I can say about the Bang Brothers franchise is they actually really care about doing the right thing. If you had any idea how much charity is supported by that company, all over the place, like just places you'd never expect it. But anyway,
that's wild. Well, so here's the real rub, right? Because to borrow a pun from Bang Bros. Anyway, here's the real rub is that in my opinion, you and I are kind of co-locating around this notion that there is something more than just a medium that is provided for speech via these social media companies. And there is some recognition of, there's an article here I'll put up from
It's evil,
ABC.
man.
Well, look at
It
this.
is.
So this is yesterday in the early afternoon. It's ABC News article titled "Addictive Social Media Feeds That Keep Children Online Targeted by New York Lawmakers." And the gist of this article is that Governor Hochul in New York, and I can't remember the other Democrat politician there, but they are pushing to create regulations that not only guard the data and privacy of those under 18. It talks about TikTok being fined earlier in September, like almost $400 million for a data privacy issue, and that may have been European in nature through the UK or the EU. But there is some recognition already that there is something going on. But my problem is simply we haven't identified what that problem is yet. So as much as I am a fan at this point of the idea that we could somehow foreclose or mitigate the excesses of being surreally online for young people, I'm not sure that we have even been given the requisite level of transparency to fully understand what exactly is happening. What is the mechanism by which these young students are just pulled onto their phone and their never-ending scroll so that they show up the next day at school just totally drained, right? They're emotionally drained, physically drained, unable to focus. They're not getting anything out of that. And then that is sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy that they are going to have mental health issues.
Yeah, garbage parenting. I mean, look, my kids are not allowed to take their phone into their room past bedtime. That's it. And, if you're, as long as we understand that we have to allow natural selection to take its course, hey, I don't care. I mean, I care on one level because I do think what they're doing is nasty and evil and crappy, but really all they're doing is delivering content that their viewers think is interesting. It's the same thing as when you'd sit, I don't know if they had Saturday morning cartoons still when you were a kid, but we'd sit there and we'd watch it in a commercial, be like, oh my God, I need that G.I. Joe with the Kung Fu grip, Mom, and I'm an abused kid if I don't have it. We've always taken advantage of what kids want. But this, thank you for putting this article up here. This is something I wrote. I mean, God, now it's almost 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But, there are two different approaches to this. And, I'm a European citizen as well as an American citizen. I'm Italian. I hate it when Europeans say I'm an EU citizen, because no, you're not. You're Italian or you're French or you're whatever. Can't wait till the EU dissolves.
We'll have a follow-up immigration episode then.
Not just immigration. No, it's like the Germans should have tried this. It's the third time the Germans have tried to conquer Europe, and they finally did it. They just changed the Deutschmark into the euro and fed that to everybody. But in Europe, you have a constitutional right to privacy that is co-equal with your right to free speech.
You've talked to me about this before, and this is something that you teach on when you go and speak at law schools here in the United States, yeah? Just sort of as a comparative study.
Yeah, I teach more in Europe now, but I teach in Italy every summer, and I just love the fact that we have this constitutional right to privacy, because it actually constrains what these big companies can do with your data, how they can use it, how they have to disclose it. Look, the GDPR is a absolute mess. I mean, it is built by committee, built by Europeans, so it isn't gonna look how
young
fat
Marco. Look at young Marco, fresh al fresco.
Yeah, it's pre-cancer Marco, but
Man.
yeah, but it was but this case, this article came out when the right to be forgotten and the European privacy directives were really just starting to take off in the internet space. And there was some guy who had been involved in a foreclosure, and it was 10 years prior. And then he did nothing of any real import since then. Well, so then anytime you searched for him, what you found is this guy had this foreclosure and bankruptcy issue. Well, 10 years later, is that really all that there ought to be about him? Now, under the First Amendment, Yes, absolutely. I should be able to pick back to, that one time that you did that one thing in that one embarrassing place and make that who you are forever, and that's not how the human experience has been. We've lived an ephemeral experience for, you know, since we were beating each other over the head with jawbones of bigger dead animals, right? It has been always that maybe your largest achievements were your achievements, or the biggest story about you was the story. And instead, what we've had is we've had these tech companies that are able to both change who you really are, take all of your data and everything and make you into a product. But when you really look at how they operate, it's as if, you ever see the movie the Lives of Others, where it's about the East German Stasi?
I did not see that. No.
If you brought back an East German Stasi officer from the heyday of communist East Germany and said, hey, you don't have to break into somebody's apartment and put in spy cameras and spy microphones. We're going to make everybody beg for it. They will do it voluntarily. They'll make sure to put every bit of information up about them there. And then you can run a compromat on anyone you want at any time you want. And they will thank you for it. In fact, they'll pay you to do it. That's where we are with social media. That's why, and I'm somebody who's on social media a lot. I like communicating.
Look, but I don't feel like a hypocrite really at all. I feel like sort of a grizzled veteran of these sort of digital wars, right, that we've been involved in over the last several years. And if any of you watching or listening have not conceived of the idea that we have been at war, whether we intended to be it not or not, I do urge you to think critically about how social media and these communication mechanisms have been leveraged by governments at every level over the last several years to urge and persuade behavior that it was terrifying to me. But that's sort of the issue that I'm having, is that when we're thinking about social media in the context of younger people, I say things such as, one necessarily spends their time in the first, 10, 12, 13 years of life, basically in a drunken stupor, right? It's difficult for me to even remember being an age younger than, say 20-ish, right? I mean, I have memories of doing certain things, but in terms of a conscious being with, some level of intentionality and priorities and values and, application of action to consequence and these things, the world is a really complicated place. And if the whole of the online world is at your thumbs every night by virtue of just sheer force of government and certain messaging, I guess my concern about the need for young people to be online, or our need to think better of these sort of ham-handed attempts like Montana is doing. I don't think Montana is going about this the right way. I think directionally, Montana and its leadership recognize that there's something really wrong with something like TikTok, right? And they couch it in sort of the, China is an adversary of the US, the data centers are offshore. These are the various issues that we're having. These are the people involved in ByteDance. They are former heads of this company, which does military intelligence for this and blah, blah, blah. They can string all of that together. I think it's rather meandering and circuitous. And I think the court is likely going to deny is going to grant the motion for preliminary injunction, staying the enforcement of the law in January. And I think that's a travesty for the conversation that I'm attempting to have with you now, Mark, which is that this belies the true ill of social media, in that younger people are not seeking their driver's licenses. Younger people are advocating en masse against their own individual liberties, as if there's this safety. Social media has collectivized the consciousness in a way that everybody would rather feel safe than be free. And I know it sounds trite, but
kids these days, damn it.
Yeah, but freedom is something that you do. right? And a lot of kids have just been told that everything is messed up right now, that there's all sorts of ills and evils and dangers. And the reason I brought up, sort of that short-term memory loss or maybe long-term memory loss of just sort of the experience of being a 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old is that I can't imagine being told by just this computer in my pocket for years and years and years on end that certain things in the world were real, only to find that they may or may not have been after the fact, right?
Look, the fact that social media lies to you, well, the media has always lied to you. It's I mean, you could look back at any generation of media. I mean, if you ever see anybody, for example, Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, you know what that means to me? Sorry, I don't know if I can do that on this show or not, but that's okay, even louder. I mean, Walter fucking Duranty, a paid agent of Stalin, won the Pulitzer Prize for reporting on what a great guy Stalin was as Stalin was committing genocide. Herbert Matthews writes Red Star over China. And when I go to journalism school back in the 80s, we're shown him as an example of how we ought to, I'm sorry, Edgar Snowden. Herbert Matthews was the guy that was talking about what a great guy Castro was. Media has always lied. So the fact that it's just lying in a decentralized manner now doesn't change the fact that, we either have to change fundamentally what we believe freedom of expression should be, or we should trust the fact that eventually the marketplace of ideas will bring us the truth. Now, I get it that, kids are hooked onto this thing and it's designed to make it more interesting to them. But, back down to, we have a constitution that allows anybody to spawn. All you got to do is be able to blow a load and you got a kid. Well, parent better. Make your house North Korea if you have kids. Hey, and pretty soon there's only gonna be like 9 of us with kids left anyway, as the schools as the teachers union has their mission to only have 1 kid per class because everybody else has their genitals cut off. But that's
Look, we see things the same. I think. Yeah.
Now, the way I think we can have a little bit of a push in the right direction, a little bit, is I think if we did recognize a right to privacy, but we just don't have it. We supposedly have it with, or had it with respect to abortion and married people buying condoms. I mean, I don't want to get into, maybe we don't want to get into the whole Roe v. Wade thing, but what a dumb ass decision that was, because instead of saying the penumbra of rights we have do create a right to privacy, it was, which I think if it were a broad-based right to privacy, which I do think we ought to have, we either need that as a constitutional amendment or we need to revisit Roe v. Wade and look at it in a much broader sense.
And we've talked about that here. I think within the context of the internet, though, the notion of privacy is kind of foolish, right? I mean, because I hear what you're saying. I'm sort of the eternal optimist with respect to thinking that we can regain sort of that sense of what a right to privacy would look like, and then also pragmatically figure out how to realize that. But it's not obvious to me that privacy truly exists except unto one another, not necessarily to the state. As to everybody else laterally, maybe we have a right to privacy as against one another, but it's just we're in an environment where we're watching the DOJ and the SEC respectively go after one Elon Musk for various things. And it was revealed through the Twitter files how involved Twitter was with the federal government and national intelligence agencies, right? Members of the intelligence community, and how those messages were conveyed back and forth through these channels to curate certain conversations, remove certain people. And I understand that. But again, I think that what Norm is talking about is we need another Warren Commission, right? On a lot of this.
Some of our greatest media is just blatant, raw propaganda. I mean, I don't know, you can disagree with this, but I happen to think Casablanca was like the greatest movie ever made. I watch it like once a month, again and again. I love it. and talk about just absolute blatant propaganda. Like we won World War II based on propaganda. We won the Cold War based on propaganda. Propaganda is a beautiful thing. But yes, it has also now become a way that, they figured out, and especially one party figured out, if we can control this, we can control everything. And is that an evil thing? Yes. But a right to privacy, could help that. But the problem is privacy is definitely in tension with free expression. If you have, for example, false light laws, are there in tension with in great tension with freedom of speech. But
what is it? So I'm uneducated. What is a false light law, Mark?
Well, some states recognize the tort of false light, which is related to defamation, in that defamation, you need actual falsity. False light, you can kind of say the truth and create a false impression without lying. Like if I said, here's your address in North Carolina.
It's a meme law.
And right behind him, just so happens to be the local Ku Klux Klan chapter. And I've never seen you come out of your front door of that house. I wonder if he just goes out through the back and goes through there. Well, I haven't said anything false, but I've certainly created a false light that, you're an active member of the KKK. And, that's generally been considered to be just fine as long as you're in a courtroom where the judge is politically aligned with the defendant. Switch the polarity, it goes the other way. But it
almost rhymes with anti-slap, right? I guess defamation lawsuits brought against those who are of lesser means, right? And you do a lot of work in that.
It's pretty much all, not all I do, but sometimes, some weeks it feels like it's all I do, whether it's, consulting with the legislature on its law, which, by the way, we're working on one for New Hampshire right now. Went up to the New Hampshire has this Free State project, which is some of the neatest, craziest people you'll ever meet. Like they want to essentially have New Hampshire taken over by libertarians. And then, they haven't got a majority yet, but when you go to their meetings, they're a lot of fun. But I've gone up there and there's legislators in the audience. And I say, you have the worst. New Hampshire has the worst anti-slap law in America. So I don't imagine anybody from New Hampshire is in your audience. But if you do, you are fucking idiots. How do you have live free or die on your license plate? You guys think you're all so fucking libertarian, and you can't even come up with an anti-slap law half as good as Maine's. And Maine's isn't that good either. Even Massachusetts, Oregon is better. Oregon is better. Much better, actually. Quite good.
That's funny to witness in real time. I think we've got several people in here excited to see you on. I like this one from Jeff in Connecticut. Thank you, Mark, for your mentorship. Following Michael is a pleasure to witness a young man's entrepreneurship journey. Thank you, Jeff. Very nice.
Nice.
And let's see. T Girl says, I agree about the importance.
What could go wrong?
I agree about the importance of good parenting. However, the harms of TikTok, etc., will inordinately harm single-parent kids and lower socioeconomic communities. I guess that's a question. Yes, will inordinately harm. I think, of course. And then who do we have to credit for no-fault divorces and sort of the decline of what the institution of marriage as one of I guess convenience or temporary alignment of interests rather than a commitment before God and a contract between people.
I can't disagree with her that will be the impact, but you know what? Then that just means you got to work a little harder as a parent. I mean, yeah, it's easy for me to say, but hell, I work 80 hours a week, and I am definitely not in the lower socioeconomic community right now. I don't know, if I didn't have a job and I just sat around collecting, I think I'd have more time to parent, but maybe it's
well, you also have more time to thumb around on social media. T-Girl followed up by saying, I also feel some of the most detrimental and influential influences on young people are pushed through the educational system.
T-Girl for president, then.
It's hard to argue with that, especially on a week where we're seeing all of the student groups on Harvard's campus issue such
Dude.
ridiculously stupid and tone deaf statements, and then try to run away from them for fear of not being able to get their 6-figure jobs after having been associated with those groups. Anyway,
I think it's
I agree.
so funny that these universities are all of a sudden saying, "Hey, maybe we need to listen to both sides of this," and and it's like, "Oh, now you don't feel like you need to run out and make a really rushed statement, huh?"
Yeah,
because maybe you sat back and listened a little bit on other issues, but yeah, and to T Girl's statement there, though, I want to make sure that I think there's a missing word there, and it's pushed through the government education system.
Public. Yeah,
I know. I've stopped saying public. They're not public. You can't go down there and have any input. In fact, they'll probably have you locked up or investigated
government daycares, right?
Yeah,
enforced by truancy laws.
The government schools have decided to push one side of an agenda very, very hard. And trying to, you got to combat that if you want to do good parenting just as much as you got to combat social media. For an example, I mean, I don't know if it's too tangential. If it is, just say reel it in, Marco. But they have this this drill every semester at my kids' school where they have to all like drill for a school shooting. Now, the likelihood, I understand school shootings happen, but statistically, they don't. Think like a computer. Statistically, they just don't happen. All right. Statistically, this was a good investment as opposed to,
right.
My fucking Powerball tickets, voluntary tax on the stupid. All right. But that I have just as much a chance of winning that as my kids getting shot up in a school. So when they have that, I tell the school, I'm like, my kids come home before you do that drill. Because the only reason that they are doing that is to make sure that people are scared of the things they want them scared of.
Because the drills have been going on for however long, right? And growing up where I grew up in North Carolina, the only real threat that, there was for us were hurricanes. So the drills were sort of file into the hallways and, get in the crouch position and just up against the lockers or the hallway, the interior hallway walls, and just
love the
smell
idea.
your own butt for 5 or 10 minutes until you go back into your class, right?
But they want to grow up a generation of people hostile to Second Amendment rights, and this, what a great way to do it than to terrorize them when they're kids. Meanwhile, it's funny. Me and my mom were talking yesterday. When I was in high school, kids literally brought rifles to school because
in their trucks, because they were going to hunt, they were going to go hunting after, or they went hunting before. Because I grew up in the country, but that was realistic for us. Is that there were guys that would go.
We didn't do that, but we had when you had ROTC day, kids were like literally carrying rifles on their shoulder on the school bus. No problem, right?
Wow.
But it was
that's mind blowing,
right? So it's what you're trying to do. I mean, you're trying to train kids to be afraid. If there's a school shooter, let me tell you, man, have you ever seen, when I was in the Army, trained men who were there for the reason of like getting involved in some shit would not be able to remember what the hell they were supposed to do, even with blanks getting shot at them. You think some teacher that doesn't even know what their pronoun or gender is with a bone through their nose is going to know what to do in a panic situation when that first round goes off? And then 7-year-olds are going to remember their training. Cops don't remember their training when shit starts popping off. So what's the value? 100% chance you're going to traumatize and put fear into these kids. A 0.001% chance that they're going to even need the training, and an even smaller chance than that it's going to do any good. Live your fucking lives.
Yeah. But in this, I think we do need to wrap this up. We've been going for about 50 minutes. I think I promised you 30 to 45. And I have a real job, as do you, to attend to here before it gets too late. But just to sort of put a bow on that, I think that what you just expressed is sort of that is the most salient reason that I am mindful of how social media is being engineered from its back end and how these feeds are being curated for our young people, right?
Yeah.
It is arbitraging that real life scenario in school permanently and ubiquitously online, so that there is no way for young people to avoid encountering things that, you know, you as a parent, me as a parent, that we would not want them to encounter, right? And there are ways, like you said, there are ways parents can take steps, but it is an additional job, right? That is, it requires a certain level of competency, savvy, and commitment and discipline to enforcing those things that you put into place, and also communicating to your child why that is, and understanding that they might not appreciate it or understand it until much later, but they're going to be better for it. And that's what parenting occurs to me to be right now anyway. But more generally, it's difficult because the trope is what? That young people know tech better than older people, right?
Maybe they do, but social pressure and culture is a real thing. There was a town I read about this town in Ireland where all the parents got together, all of them, and agreed none of their kids would get a phone until a certain age. Like, imagine that. You just can't, like, nobody's got one, period. What a great thing, or heck, I have a chat group now with all my kids' friends' parents. So the kids play us off of each other like, oh, well, I need to go on my video game because that's how I'm playing with Michael here. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So we text the parents. We're like, hey, what do you say we all throw the boys out today? And then we have a coordinated attack on our kids where we all throw them out and we say, don't come back until it rains. And, and it's like, well, what if it doesn't rain till it's dark? Like, well, then come back after that. But you're not allowed in the house. Like, that's what our parents used to do. We would just get up, and they used to have commercials to remind our parents that they had kids. It's like, yeah, it's 9 p.m. Do you know where your kids are? Now I'm like, yeah, I know where my kids are. They're fucking in their room,
locked in. Yeah, they're part of the board.
Which I didn't know where they were. But,
yeah, I think they're physically in their room, but I don't know where they are. That
about, the effort it takes to pass a stupid law like this TikTok law, which, again, my heart is behind it.
Small revelation, Mark. That was brilliant. Just the "Do you know where your kids are" campaign can actually come back based on the facts that we just laid out. It's like, sure, my kid is 17 and doesn't have a driver's license, doesn't to have a driver's license, is anti-Second Amendment, doesn't know what speech is. No, right. Their body is physically in the house that I pay for. It's physically consuming the meals that I prepare. But no, I have no idea where my kid is.
Yeah. So, it is. And look, like the commenter said, are there people in different economic classes than you and me that might have a harder time of doing this? Well, it's always been harder to be poor, but when I grew up, it was the rich kids who had the problem. They were always the ones doing cocaine and breaking into people's houses. Us poor kids understood what it was to have to work for a living because we saw our dads do it.
Yep. Well, look, some things never change. I think that's going to be an enduring proposition. But Mark, I appreciate it. I think we need to do this more regularly. I'd love to get to peel back more of your First Amendment fundamentals. I know that we saw this through the lens of the Montana, the TikTok thing, and then what they're doing in New York. But these are things to keep track of. And I personally am going to continue to chip away at what I believe I'm trying to say when I'm saying that this is about more than just speech or something other than speech. I recognize that speech occurs on the platform, but I think there was there's the case of, you can't run a brothel inside of a bookstore and say that, shutting it down is a First Amendment violation. Right. It's that's sort of the I think the concept that I'm getting at. When I'm focusing on these things, because at the same time I am I don't want to say I'm a big fan of the First Amendment. I am true to the promises of our God-granted rights, right? And the First Amendment recognizes that. Right?
Look, the one of the greatest philosophers of our time is Sebastian Maniscalco, who recognizes that we live in a culture that no longer has any shame or embarrassment. No one's embarrassed. You're not, there was just this kid I felt terrible for the kid. She was some kid that had a scholarship, and then her principal took it away because there was some video of her twerking. It's like, so sorry, white girls aren't allowed to twerk. It was the weirdest thing. But also at the same time, why wasn't she embarrassed to do that?
That's right. That's right.
Was a scholarship for it? No, that's not fair.
But again, young people, they don't have fully developed frontal lobes. They're still growing till they're 25, right? And they're going to do things because they don't have a concept for how long life actually is if you're living it.
It is absolutely true that like women are retarded until they're 22 and men are retarded till they're about 32.
I think I'm still a green dart, as my son would say.
I think that we should recognize that.
Yeah, I agree. Marc, thank you so much. It's great to see you. You look great. Love the beautiful scene behind you there. Sun shining on you. Everybody, we will be back on Monday.
All right, guys.
8 a.m. Eastern time. You can find us on X, on YouTube Live, on Rumble Video. Follow us on X at LawPod Daily. If you don't catch the streams live, you can always find those uploaded to your favorite podcast platform, whether that's Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Play, Overcast, etc. Leave us 5 stars or leave us alone. Marc, happy Friday the 13th. Happy Freaky Speech Friday. Go tell somebody that you don't love them, you know?
All right.
All right, man. Bye.
Bye now.